Hello there. In this video I will show you how to build a recycler view to list maybe say a list of people and also use view binding, so you leave the old system of using find view by ID because it's not that safe and you will run into issues with it eventually, and it just clutters the entire activity or fragment or whatever you will use. But we will start simple. So let's create a new project and I'll call this RecyclerView with view binding and fish. We will allow Gradle to build. I can make some space here. I'm going to pin this activity main up here. You can also find this if you right click here and you will see unpin tab and now it's pin tab. We can also press this button to find our layout file. Now let's go into our Gradle scripts and to the module one, not the project. We scroll down here, just below this Kotlin options, I'll put build features, view binding, true, sync now. Done. This will allow us to access our views once with Android will auto-generate a class for us, which starts with, I think, main activity bind, something like that. We'll see. Let's start lateness var binding, and we see it there, activity main binding. That's how it names, and I think fragment would be fragment main binding. And the only really difference here is that we do binding, we access the activity main binding class, go to inflate, pass in a property that is available from the activity called layout inflator, and this one we change with sending binding root, and it's done. We will see its advantages soon, but first let's go to activity main. Let's change this text view. I want it, I'll remove the bottom constraint, set it 60 from top, write something like people, increase the font size to 34, and then we can also, just for fun, name this title text view, and I'm going to take this recycler view here, similar to list in SwiftUI, but it's much more like UIKit where you have to do a lot of things, components. We'll get to that. I'll drag this in, I'll put it here in the middle. We see that its top constraint has gone to the constraint layout, which I don't want. I'll remove it from here, and then I'll press it again and it will attach to the bottom of this text view, and I'll set it to 16, so we're being consistent, and I'll also give it an ID called people recycler view. It's a good idea to name your things uniquely and descriptive. As you'll see now, if we go in here, if we type binding and press dot, we see here's our people recycler view and here's our title text view. So you can easily access it, and we will get to that soon. But first I'll comment it out. Now in layout we're going to need an XML file for the view, how it will look per row. Right now we see it's a horrible text like that. So if you press on layout here, right click, new layout resource file. I'm going to call this person row, and I'll also tab this to the top. Now here we have a constraint layout, and I'm going to add the text view for the person's name. Probably gonna add it here. Now one interesting thing here is if we press on the constraint layout, we say it takes this entire size, and if we look here, layout width and layout height, it's going to match the parent, and this is going to be a child of a recycler view, which means each element will take this much room, this entire space. And and we don't want that. Alright, and we also see something interesting here. We don't want these to be constants. We want this to match constraint. So it really fits to the walls here, and on height the same thing, match constraint, because it was protruding outside the view. Now if we go back to person row, we are going to do, for the height, we are going to say wrap content. And now we see this. This is the size of the row. But we're going to change it a bit. We're going to press on this text view. We're also going to add a constraint to bottom at 16. And if we look at constraint layout, this is our component. A good idea is to add a background color to this constraint layout. So it will be visible when we add this to the RecyclerView. I'm going to take purple, some light color. Probably going to have make the text a bit darker. I'll just put it down here. Maybe also increase the size of the text view. Where we go? There we go. 24. That's big. Okay, 20. Also, I don't want it to have a value initially, so we can see also later that it will work when we set the values. But we're going to use this one, and this has like a handyman tool here, and this is used just for the preview. So the value here will not be shown. I'm going to add Captain Zane, and I'm going to remove this one. As we see, this has no value. So if we run this program now, somehow show this will be there will be no text here because it's empty. Let's give this a good idea. Let's call it name text view. Sure. And let's take a look at the activity main. What we can do here, we can also add a preview here. So we find it in common attributes. There's this list item, and we see this handy tool again. If I select here, I can see here at the top, person row, pick it. Now we get a list of 10, I think. Yeah, let's set it to a 5. We also see there's no space between them. Let's add some margin. If we go back to person row, click the search icon here, right margin, and oh, we're even selecting the text view, which is not what we want. It's the constraint layout. And press this. Let's go to margin bottom. Let's say 3 dp. And we can remove that. Go back to activity main, and now we have some spacing. So now we see each row. So now we see how we can design the UI for each row. And that's it, we don't need to touch the user interface more than that. This is for the entire screen, and this is for each row. Now, here we have our activity. We're going to need a special class that will interact. Let's say it's going to be the conduit between our activity and the UI. And since we're going to make a list, let's already create one now. Let's call it private vol list people list, and I'm going to let it be a list of string, and I'll call it list of, and I'm going to say Captain Zane cookie. That's another good name. First mate Chuckles. And here we have 3. We can leave it like that. Not sure we need this. Ah, it actually wants string. Alright. Let's create a special class by selecting the top package. This might not look like this for you, because if we press it, the cogwheel, go to tree appearance, you might have this, I think it's the compact middle packages. So this, I think, is how it looks for you. But I have, or even flattened packages. I'm going to remove these because I prefer it like this. Because you can create other packages here later for like UI or view models, or depending what kind of app you're doing. Anyways, let's right click here, let's create a new Kotlin class file, and let's call this a people list adapter. And this class will be responsible for, as we said, being a conduit between the activity and the UI. And we need it to be a special class. It needs to inherit from a certain class that handles this. And it's, I think, a child class of RecyclerView. So RecyclerView and there we have it, adapter. And we're also going to need to send in a view holder, which we will create soon. Let's call it a person row view holder, something descriptive. And you might have seen from documentation that you can create this view holder outside. I'm going to create it inside because I'm not going to use it for anything else. I'm going to call it class person row view holder, as we see there. And this one also needs to inherit from another superclass, a child RecyclerView view holder, as we see there. The top two choices. And this one requires a view. Especially, I'm going to avoid using binding here because I think that will complicate things, but you can use a binding here as well, and we will soon see its advantages in main activity. But we will need to pass this in a view, and this will be the view that we created, like person row. And then this will need to be passed later in here as it expects, an item view. And I don't think we did, yeah, I think that's all. We might just need a reference to the, if you go back to person row here, we want a reference to this text view for the name. So we'll say val name text view. It already knows what I'm typing because it's cyclic. And text view, I'll do this, find view by ID. No auto completion. Anyways, and here we will see name text view. How about we deal with this first? Since this is we have put it inside the class, we're going to need to write people list adapter dot. And you see here, we might need to add an empty constructor to please it. Another warning. We see here we need to implement other members, which if you right click here, show context actions, implement members. We see we need to implement these three, so I'll shift click down here, press OK. Now it will be happy. And we forgot to add a constructor invocation here. Now it's happy. And why is this one not showing? All right, we're not referring to the view. We've grown to custom with using main activity. View.findView by ID. There we go. Because in here you would not have needed to do that because you're inside the class and it's automatically referring to the view. If you do this, find view by ID, it knows. But you don't even need to write this. All right. So our person row view holder is complete. It will have a reference to the text view, and we don't need to think about it anymore. And now let's go in here to onCreate view holder. Here we will need to take we need to create a view holder with the contents. Consider the row. It's here where we're creating this person row view holder, inflating it from this person row, and then returning it. So let's say vol inflator, and remember this is kind of like activity here. We have a layout inflator by default, the subclass, and we create it from context. The context will be the parent, which we see is passed in up here. We have parent context, and then I don't think we need more there. We inflate the resource that we're passing, which in our case here is the layout person row. And then we also need to pass the parent, and then I think it was false. Yep, we don't need to attach it to root. Now we have the inflator. We can create a val view holder, which is in this case is our person row view holder. But I don't think we need to do, I think it imports it, no. And here we pass in the inflator. We can return view holder. And we don't need to do this in one line. We can now just do this here, but just to show you what we're passing. And then here we have the get item count. Here we're going to pass the amount of rows in our list, or in our people. If we look at main activities, just 3. But we will make this dynamic. We will not hard code it to 3 here, because that's, if we do like this, it will always be 3. But for now, let's keep it there. And then here we have the unbind view holder. Like, what happens when we have created this view holder? Because that's what happens here. Here we're creating the view holder. We're taking this person row here, we're inflating it, and we're returning it. And this count is saying how many times am I going to do that? And since our list will only have 3 names, it will be 3 times. And then we have here on bind view holder. Okay, once you have created the view holder, what happens? And in our case, we are going to take a name from that list and access this text view and set its name. But before we do that, we need a way to send the list here. And there are different ways to doing this. There are many ways. Some are probably not the best way. You could create this adapter, and then once it's created, assign it, and different ways. There's the view model approach, which you might come to know later. But we're going to keep it simple. We are going to say here we're going to pass a people list string. We don't need to know. It doesn't need to know where it's coming from. It doesn't need to have more responsibility than that. This is a little cleaner like this. And then we can also change this. Since we know we're going to list, we can say return people. All right. We also want to store this. We're going to create a value of this. So this is the same thing as we're avoiding doing the whole initialize approach by taking that parameter and setting it. The Kotlin approach, they like it like this. And here we have the people list size. And since this is a one-liner, I can be even more clever and use the advantages of Kotlin and just assign it like this. This automatically means it's returning the size of the people list. Save some room. And now we have the access to a list here. We can finally access the names and create, begin here to, assign the values to our text view. So we can say val name people list, and you can see here we're getting a position for each row. So I can pass this in here. We don't need to concern us, index out of range of that at the moment. And we have our holder here, and this holder is this class up here. And if we press dot, we can see we have our name text view. And we're going to assign the text name to text. That's all. That's all we need to do. Here we take the holder and we get the name from the people list, and we can assign it. And we can create more complex objects. We can create a person class with name, surname, age, and all that, and assign many different things. So here it is. That's simple. You can minimize this. If you go back to main activity, you might have, if you used the normal system, now we're going to see the advantages of binding. You might have done something like find view by ID here to get your people recycler view, and maybe you wanted to change your title text view, and then you realize I don't want to be doing this several times, each time it's creating or other things, then you might have moved this out to a variable, and then you might have a title variable for the text view, title text view variable, you had a recycle, it just gets too much, and it's prone to error. Instead, use the binding, and the binding really, after we've done this little initializing here, and we have this line here, we just type binding, and we see there's our people recycler view, there's our title text view. So now we can initialize our recycler view, and first thing is we have to access the layout manager, and we assign it a layout manager, and here we need to pass in this as a context, I think. All right, yeah, sorry. We have, that's the superclass, a linear layout manager, and this. The point of linear layout manager is that here we can actually decide if we want to show our list vertically, like how we have it now, or horizontally, like we see in galleries and apps. And I think if we press Command P, we can see there we have orientation. And I think it's a superclass, linear layout manager. There we have it. So this would be the approach of making a linear layout manager, something like that. And after we've assigned the layout manager, saying we want to show the items in a vertical manner, we do this again. We access the people recycler view, and here we have an adapter, and here we can, if we want, create a variable of our adapter, so we don't need to do it again each time we need to. So we can say private vol people list adapter, and we have it there, and I'll create a people list adapter. I can assign this variable here, and then you might want it here, and you can send the people list, but I'm not sure I'm going to use this people list adapter again, but I'll leave it out here just in case, and I will assign it here. And you can see we're sending our people list. So you might have an app where you can add or remove people. You'll be changing this one, and then this is the way they're getting passed. And maybe let's see if this works. We've been coding and we don't even know. Let's run this. Just have to build the Gradle. And there we see Captain Zane, Cookie, first mate Chuckles. Now the next step would be to make it a little more interactive. So how do we go about that? Let's just keep it simple and just say we want to tap here and we want something to happen. How do we do that? Like the initial approach with passing the people list, there are different ways, but let's keep it simple. Let's go to the adapter here. And here, where we assign the name to the text field, we can add a set on click listener. So if we go into a holder, we see something here. We see the text view and we see the item view. The name text view is just the text, not the constraint layout, so it will only trigger if we click on the text. Item view is always there. I think it's a polymorphic class, so it can be anything, and in this case we can pretend it's the constraint layout. So we can access this one, item view. It will represent the entire row, and we can visualize it as being this entire constraint layout. So setting a on-click listener on it means that clicking anywhere here will trigger it. So set on-click listener, and now we come to the point, what do we do? And how do we pass the information back to anyone who would be interested, which maybe the main activity is. Maybe we want to, when you click that, it would allow you to know what detail view of that person to navigate to, or maybe it's like a delete button or an edit button or anything. How do we inform the activity in this case, or if it's a fragment, that's what happens. You could pass in the activity or fragment here and notify it like that, assign some that, but that would be a wrong approach when working with Kotlin. Kotlin really likes callbacks. Callbacks are in this way, we can pass in a closure, a function, and we can say, let's call it on row clicked, and this is what it looks like initially. A closure, a parenthesis, and its return value. It's a function. In this case, we want to return something, a name. Let's say person name of type string. Now you don't really need the person name, but I think it's nice to be explicit. It helps out. And there's another good advantage of it, I will see soon. And here we go to our set on click listener and we say on row clicked, and here we would pass the name that we accessed here. We can add a spacing here to separate that. Let's go back to main activity. We see we have an error here because we need to deal with the new parameter, and we can see here if we do this again, we see people list and on row click. So I'll pass back my people list and I'll actually add the argument call so we can see it, and I'll add curly braces and then press enter. So it's clear that this is what when someone taps that, what are we going to do? So now we have an it here, which is not preferable. And now we can see, if I press B here, we see the argument name added. You can clearly see what it is because the string could mean anything. Person name, much clearer. Let's see here. What do we want to do? We have a name. All right, you can also remove this old one. Let's here if you had a fragment and if this was a fragment with the list, you could untap navigate to a detail view of that person where you can see a lot of things. In our case, we're going to keep it simple, and I'm going to say toast, and I'm going to make text, and the context in this is this activity, and I think the text will you clicked on person name, and then we need to pass in how long we show it. I'll put length long, and then let's see here, can we move these? Yes, we can. Put arguments on separate lines, and I'll show it. Let's see if it works by rerunning the application. You clicked on Captain Zane. You clicked on cookie. Probably should reduce the duration. Rerun. First made chuckles. Cookie. And that's it. So in this case, I didn't need a variable because I'm assigning it here once, but you might want it in another use case. This is simple. You could also clean this up, move this to a separate function, and that's it. I hope that was useful.